Now, from KELOLAND Media Group and inside KELOLAND Special, remembering those who served.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Perry Groten. On this special edition of Inside KELOLAND, we focus on remembering the lives of men and women who have served our country. From a memorial in Sioux Falls preserving World War II history to the sculpture that will soon stand in Pierre honoring the vital role of Native American code talkers. We'll also look back at our archives for the placing of a memorial in Arlington National Cemetery and how the legacy of a World War II nurse will soon be enshrined with the construction of a new Sioux Falls elementary school. The USS South Dakota Battleship Memorial began its 55th season as a military museum earlier this month. Joining me now is Diane Diekman, Karen Dunham, and Tom Verhey from the Board of Directors of the Battleship Memorial South Dakota. Thanks for joining us for Inside KELOLAND.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you. Diane, I think we'll start with you. Talk about the historical significance of the USS South Dakota. What was it and what kind of role did it play in World War II?
Okay, the battleship USS South Dakota was commissioned in March 1942 when things were going kind of poorly for the Allies at that time. And it did its sea trials, and then it went to the Western Pacific in September. And it participated in two major battles around Guadalcanal. And then it had so much damage done to it that it had to go back to the shipyard, and all the shipyards on the West Coast were occupied at that time. So it went through the Panama Canal and up to the Brooklyn Navy Yard for repairs, and then they also installed some new, better guns and radar. And then it went to the North Atlantic for a few months with part of the British fleet. They were trying to get the Turpas of the German Navy to come out and fight, but it wouldn't. So then the South Dakota and the Alabama came back to the U.S., went back to the Western Pacific, and spent the rest of the war there. South Dakota was at the Marianas Islands in '44, Okinawa, and it was the first battleship to shell the homeland of Japan. So from its commissioning in the summer of '42 until the end of the war, it was in battle on guard the entire time, except for several periods in the shipyard for repairs. So it got a lot of action in those few years.
It's my understanding it was one of, if not the most decorated battleship of World War II?
Right. It didn't have quite as many battle stars as the North Carolina, but it had a higher award. Mm-hmm. So those two have argued for almost 80 years about which one's most decorated, but the South Dakota technically outranks it.
Yeah, all about the bragging rights. All right.
That's right.
Well, let's talk to you, Karen. Talk about for years and years, a lot of the sailors who served aboard the South Dakota would come back to Sioux Falls for the reunion at the battleship.
They do. The Battleship Memorial was dedicated in 1969, and we had the first reunion in 1970. And my husband was in the Naval Reserve at the time, as was I, and then we worked with Evans Nord, who was, of course, with Kello, which is our attachment to the battleship in the beginning, so to speak. And then with that connection, we started hosting the reunion locally for the crew members that were coming back. And back in those days, we'd have it every 2 years, and we'd get anywhere from, I suppose, 300 to 400 to 500 people. And they were all anxious to come back. Those that learned about it, several never found out about it and things. But then the last few years, we've been having fewer, because naturally there's fewer veterans that are still living that were on the ship and things, but they have them every year. This year we have our friend Leon Gee coming from Sanger, California. He's 98 and can't wait to come back in August 10th for our program that we're going to have at the memorial again. So, and we have the son of one of them that has been here several times too.
What does it take to organize a gathering like that?
Less now than it used to. But we have, with only 2 or 3, we just have kind of a mini reunion type thing with gathering, depending on how many show up. But we have had big banquets where they last in 2 and 3 days with, you know, dances and several meetings and this type of thing and stuff. But the camaraderie of all the crew members is just great, and their families and things like that. And we have second generations that come too that really enjoy meeting the crew members and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So over the years, it's been a real rewarding experience, and I've enjoyed it. And we've enjoyed the, you know, meetings and the commitments with our friends that we've met over the years and stuff like that. So
we've changed the focus now, because it's always been focused on the crew members reunion. Well, there aren't so many of them left anymore, so now we're focusing more on education and the younger generation. So we're trying to encourage more people to come and learn about the history. As opposed to being the people who actually made that history.
Mm-hmm. Tom, let's talk to you. Talk about what's the season just opened at the museum. Talk about what kind of displays people can see when they visit the museum.
So a special thing, Perry, that we have going on during the month of May, we have the USS South Dakota Harley-Davidson on display in our collection. That is a one of a kind Harley-Davidson motorcycle that was made as part of the commissioning process for the SSN 790 USS South Dakota nuclear submarine, which is on active duty. That would be the 3rd vessel that's held the South Dakota name. And
yeah, we're looking at pictures of it here. It's painted by hand painted by a South Dakota artist too.
Yes, absolutely. The motorcycle was custom painted. One side depicts the USS South Dakota battleship, and the right-hand side of the bike depicts the USS South Dakota nuclear submarine. The motorcycle was in Massachusetts during the commissioning of the USS South Dakota, and key to the motorcycle is actually kept on board the USS South Dakota, which is on active duty presently. Mm-hmm.
What are people's reactions when they see the motorcycle?
Takes a lot of people by surprise finding a motorcycle inside of our museum. They think naval vessel, and you know, motorcycles and ships tend to not be hand in hand, but it fits exceptionally well within our collection because of the significance of what the motorcycle is, why it was created, and what it stands for. Mm-hmm. Additionally, we're in the process of reassembling our collection of artifacts at the museum, and our archivist Chris Tucker is presently moving all of our artifacts into a timeline display from the commissioning through the different war efforts in the Atlantic and Pacific, through the decommissioning, and then the final phase, which would be the current 1969 when the museum was first built and dedicated through present.
Mm-hmm. Diane, you talked about that the focus is shifting from the crew members of the USS South Dakota to more of education. Does that worry you that people might end up forgetting about the role that the USS South Dakota has had on global history?
Well, that's what we don't want to happen. That's why we keep it out there. We have a battleship on the prairie, and we try to encourage people to come see it, and it's really enjoyable to see how many kids will spend hours looking at all the photographs in there. The interest is there, so we want to build and support that so that we do have more people come to see it and that it won't be forgotten.
Mm-hmm. And Karen, what people see on the outside, is a scale of the actual battleship.
Exactly right. That's the outline you see in concrete. That is the size the ship was. That's correct.
Wow.
And the Seabees of the Naval Reserve were the ones that did that work several years ago, and it was being built and things like that. Yeah.
Like 1975.
Is that the year it was? Ago. Well, yeah, it is a few years ago.
I mean, what does it mean for the community of Sioux Falls to have something like this in the city?
My point of view, excuse me.
No, go ahead.
My point of view is that you talk to so many local people that do not know what it's in there. They've driven by 6 million times and they say, going to stop tomorrow. Well, In fact, I talked to a gentleman today. He told me that, you know, I've lived here X number of years and I still have not gotten inside there, along with my good friend who was in the Navy. So we got to go over there. And I told him that we were open and when he should go and things like that. So I think it's important that, you know, we keep getting our word out there so people keep stopping and coming and have an interest in it. Yeah.
We hear that a lot. And everybody in Sioux Falls knows where it is, and they've all driven by it. But yeah, many times we hear, "What? But I've never stopped there." And is it a museum? Can you go inside? So yes, it's open from the 1st of May through the end of September. Every day, 9:30 to 5:30. There is no admission. It's free, so they can come down and look around. And people who finally come inside are amazed at all that they see when they're in there.
Yeah.
And one thing to not be forgotten is the unique thing with the battleship South Dakota is it wasn't just a vessel, it was an entire series of battleship, that there were 4 battleships that were the South Dakota class of battleships, whereas the very first South Dakota, which was a active duty during World War II, that was a vessel with the name. The nuclear submarine is a vessel with the name, part of the Virginia-class submarines, but the battleship South Dakota was actually the South Dakota class battleship, consisting of the lead ship, the USS South Dakota, the USS Indiana, the USS Massachusetts, and then the last of her class was the USS Alabama.
Okay.
One unique thing with it is, you know, and unfortunate, after World War II, they were decommissioning thousands of naval vessels. And despite the significance of the USS South Dakota, the war history of it, the only ships that really ended up getting saved were by the states that were near waterways that could bring them in and hold them as museum ships. Prior to World War II, there really was no such history of a museum ship. They were just simply used and discarded, and that's one thing during World War II that created is the modern day museum ships that we have today. And unfortunately, just the volume of ships that were being discarded in the 1960s from the World War II vessels. The South Dakota was broken up for scrap, and we had a lot of really proactive leaders here in Sioux Falls that got word of that, started a fundraiser and went out to the Philadelphia Naval Yard to save as much of the artifacts as we possibly could to be able to bring back, which was quite a feat when you look at the volume and weight of the artifacts, being able to bring those halfway across the country.
All right, quite an accomplishment for a landlocked state like South Dakota then, right? Well, thank you all for joining us for Inside KELOLAND.
I'd like to say our next day of honor is going to be August 10th, if I hadn't said that before.
Very good. Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And we're going to take a quick break.